Hey guys, what's going on? So I am here checking out a really unique, really awesome electric bike. It is the Gocycle GX. Now, if you've heard of Gocycle, they've actually been around for quite a long time, making more or less one model of electric bike with slight variations and lots of improvements. But the big thing about the Gocycle GX is that, well, all the Gocycles really, they are made from the ground up as an electric bike. They don't really take an existing frame or existing drivetrain system. They have made pretty much their own bicycle with a couple of straight bike parts like the chain, for example. But it's a really interesting, really unique take on what an electric bicycle is as a transporter for a single human. Anyways, let's go ahead and get into the details because I'm pretty excited. This is really cool. All right, so the GX is unlike the other Gocycles in the sense that it is made to be a fast folder. So what I mean by a fast folder is that a lot of the Gocycles, like I think it's the S is the other one. I actually haven't ridden the other ones. I've only ridden this one. But they have what's called pit stop wheels where the wheels come off on one side really easily. These ones are actually fairly fixed. They're not terribly easy to get off. You have to take this cap off and then do some more to get the wheels off. So the purpose of this one is not to be totally compact to put inside of like a plane or a boat. This one is more for like the everyday commuter who actually takes this vehicle into their office or into their apartment. So this is meant to be the fast folder because this one folds up fairly quickly as opposed to the others. The others, they take a little bit more time to get folded up. You got to take the wheels off front and back and then take the handlebars down. I think a lot of that is the same aside from the wheels and the suspension because the drive system even folds under for the other models. This one is meant to be pretty quick. So this is kind of like your everyday sort of folding bike. I'll kind of talk about this accessory bag real quick. I want to show you it in more detail, but it's kind of in the way because I put it here for the sake of getting here. But it holds a fair amount of stuff real quick. It has a lot of different compartments on it. It holds a fair amount too, and the mounting is actually pretty cool. So inside of here, I got a couple of things for filming. I have a couple of mounts for the camera. I even have a tripod. Also the laptop sleeve, which is pretty darn cool. But it mounts on here with kind of like this tension arm. So you kind of release the tension arm up there, and that kind of allows it to be taken off. And let me kind of support it with my leg because I got one hand. There we go. Let's pull this arm off. So with that arm out of the way, then you can take the whole bag off. So it comes off pretty darn cool. It kind of mounts onto what is more or less just a couple of nubs right here. But yeah, that's actually one of the added accessories that's not part of the Gocycle for stock. They have a lot of other accessories too, including the front and rear headlight. So that's actually an added accessory along with the bag. So everything else is stock. Up front, the wheel is actually pretty cool. It's like a magnesium wheel that just has these sort of supports on them, and so it doesn't have spokes, which is pretty cool because that way you don't have to tune them, you don't have to adjust them. It also gives it a really solid, really quick look, which is pretty cool. Like I said, this one does not have what's called the pit stop wheels that come off real easy. These ones are a little more static. What you got up here is a 140 millimeter rotor for the disc brakes up here, and these are a hydraulic disc brake. This post is actually mounted backwards, which is kind of interesting. They mounted this post backwards, so this is actually a traditional bike part, but it's used in a very peculiar way. It's mounted up to the front. I mean, I'll call it a fork because that's what it is, but it's only one side, so I guess it's kind of like a knife. But this is a one-sided, a right-sided fork with the caliper mounted backwards, and that comes into like this little area that's pretty well covered up. So you have this this disc over the disc. You have this little protective mount that goes over the disc so that it's not going to get mucked up or anything. And on the other side, of course, you have the wheel, which is sort of bracing it from impact. Also up here is the motor. So this is actually the motor. We'll kind of talk about that when we get to the electric system. But the one-sided fork is pretty neat. It gives for a very interesting ride profile. If you don't have a lot of air in the tires, I've actually tested it out a few times. If you don't have a lot of air in the tires, it kind of magnifies the way that it steers, in which when you turn one way to the left, it actually feels a little normal when you turn to the left. And when you turn to the right, it almost feels like you're trying to overcome a small obstacle, as if you're riding on an edge. And like I said, if you have some air pressure in the tires, if you have that pumped up, it's not so apparent. But when you have low air in the tires, it really kind of shines. So it does have its own riding profile, I would say. It doesn't feel like a regular bike when it steers, and you know, that's just part of the review process. But it is certainly functional in a lot of ways. I would not call it, you know, difficult. I would just say it takes a little bit of time to get the hang of, and then once you do, you probably would forget about it. I've ridden this thing for probably about maybe 20 miles, give or take. So yeah, that's what I would say about it. But this comes up into this area that's pretty well covered here. It's actually kind of a transverse mounted stem, which is pretty cool. It has a little adjustment down in there, but by and large, you're not going to get in there. This, like I said, is the light for the added accessory. It's actually pretty darn easy to install, I would say. I had to put that one on myself. So coming up to the head tube, this is the stem and handlebar in one piece. Now it does have a folding aspect. I'll talk about the folding when I'm done with the mechanical features. But this all comes up as one solid piece. It's all welded together. Really smooth welds, by the way, if you like to check out weld points, like a lot of bike guys do. But that comes into the handlebars that are fairly slim, and that's part of the folding bike aspect, is it's meant to be a smaller bike. The grips have kind of an ergonomic edge to them on either side, and they are Gocycle specific. This one is a little bit shorter to accommodate the micro shift for the Nexus that is actually in the back compartment for driving the mechanical system like normal. It's a micro shift, has 3 gears on there, pretty neat. This is the lever for the hydraulic disc brake for one side and the other. One interesting thing about these grips is that on the other side, this Gocycle specific grip actually has a little spot built into it. Let's see if I can get a good spot for the sun so you can see a little bit more with the light. It has a little spot built into it right here for a little itty bitty trigger throttle. Let's get the camera out of the way. So that's a little itty bitty trigger throttle. Once you get going a couple miles an hour, you can actually press that, and that will engage the motor directly so that you don't have to use pedal assist, which is pretty cool. If you're in the United Kingdom or another area where a throttle is not permitted by legislative standards, then don't know what the grip looks like. Mounted on the other side of the brake, I don't know if it's mounted upside down on account of the brake or if it's just the bell, but the bell is actually kind of tucked away down in here. You probably heard it at first. If you have it pressed up a little too much, that's going to kind of silence the bell a little bit because it doesn't have room to resonate around the little bell area. So kind of pull that just a tiny bit, and you got plenty of space there. Pretty cool stuff. This is actually a little hook. We'll get to that in the folding aspect. So let's talk about the frame. The frame is actually made of an injection molded magnesium, which is pretty cool. It cuts the weight down on the bicycle in total pretty well. This bike, by the way, weighs about 40 pounds. If you want to check out the exact weight that I was able to measure, go to ElectricBikeReview.com, where you can see the full specs on this bike as well as other models from Gocycle. But anyways, this is a pretty cool frame because it doesn't have like the traditional post. It kind of expands out. So this is actually the compartment where the battery sits. So the battery's inside of here, and I will show you what that looks like. But it kind of opens up. This is actually the folding latch for like the main pivot point. Then it comes up here into the seat post tube. So traditionally a seat post tube is much longer. This one's very short. And then it comes into this sleeve, and then the actual seat post, which is pretty darn wide, sets right in here. The seat post sleeve, I'll call it. I actually don't know the exact word for this part, so I call it a sleeve. Telescoping sleeve, I suppose. This is pretty neat because it comes off with a little knob. So unlike some of the quick releases, this one actually, you turn this little knob. There we go. I had it fairly snug. You loosen up that knob, and then from there you can actually pull this out. And this thing just sits in one position, more or less, just the sleeve. So it kind of has that little edge right there to accommodate for inside of the frame. You slide that little guy in there, and then from here you adjust the level of the seat with this little 4mm spot right here, little 4mm hex key. That will allow you to adjust the seat up and down. The seat post tube, you know, this part right here, the seat post tube is not mounted at a fairly straight angle. It's actually quite diagonal. I was able to measure, I think it was like 120 degrees or so from level. So that's the level surface, and then 120 degrees out to that spot. Anyways, so the sleeve comes up out of there, and then you can extend the seat post itself with the seat on top right there. That will not only extend the seat up, but it will also extend the seat back. And that seems like a fairly simple thing, but if you can believe it, that's not terribly common to this extreme on a bicycle. A lot of bicycles, the seat post tube is more vertical, so you can extend the seat higher, but if you want to adjust the reach, you would, meaning how far you actually reach your arms, you'd probably have to change something up front, maybe the stem, maybe the handlebars, something along those lines. In this case, they call it, I think it's called Vigonomic, like ergonomic with a V. I think it's a trademark phrase from Gocycle, but this actually changes the stack and the reach, meaning the stack how high and the reach how long in one fell swoop, with changing the seat post here in this more diagonal angle. So that's pretty neat. Honestly, I'm surprised I don't see that more so within the bike industry, because it seems like a pretty simple concept. Now with that, this one model, this one size can accommodate a fair amount of riders. I actually would probably put it a little bit higher for myself. I have a 34-inch inseam, so it could go a little higher for myself, but that's okay. But with it, it can accommodate a fairly common size, like someone who's 5'9" or so, and then all the way up from there. Seat is fairly normal, nothing too amazing here. It's kind of like an active seat with, I'd say, maybe like a 6-inch wide profile for the 6-inch wide footprint, and a fairly low profile. So it feels pretty good for pedaling, I would say. One interesting thing is that this little rotating mount for the reflector. So the reflector is nothing amazing about that, but it's on this little mount that actually swings out of the way with this little cup. Now, I initially thought this was a spot for a light that fell off or something like that, but it actually has a cool feature when you get into the folding aspect. So we will talk about that. So continuing on with the frame, this is again another part of the set of lights for front and rear. These are integrated lights, they're on all the time when you plug them in, that is. So this is actually a rear shock, and it's definitely an interesting design because it actually has 25 millimeters of travel, about 1 inch. Not a whole lot, but of course on a bike like this you're not going to be off-road. You're going to be doing something in the city, so that's pretty cool that they have that on there. This is actually kind of a design that leads to their other models, in which the other models, I'll talk about that, may as well. The other models, you can actually disconnect this rear suspension here very easily with this little knob right there. And then you can take the entire, like what they call the clean drive, this entire part of the bicycle, and then you can rotate it underneath so that it matches up with the front of the bike. On this particular bike, since it doesn't fold in that aspect, this is just a knob, so it's kind of like a holdover from the other designs that use the same sort of shock but in a different way. This is what they call the clean drive, this whole entire spot right in here. So this is all encased to keep you clean. Now if you'll notice, I got some pants on and they are not dirty, fancy that, because you don't really need anything to keep your pants out of the gears, because the gears are all kept there nice and neat. So it's not only just to save your pants, because that'd be kind of neat and all, but does it really require all of this stuff? And the answer is no. It's also for storing the bike. If you got a bike like this and you pack it up and you throw it in a plane or in an office or something, you don't want the parts to either get damaged when you toss it around, or you don't want all of that grease and nonsense to get onto, I don't know, the upholstery of your vehicle, or perhaps, you know, against the walls in the office, because heaven forbid that have to go to the management. But anyways, this keeps you nice and dry, keeps you also clean from any kind of grease or anything for you, and also the surroundings that you take the bike inside of. While we're at it, these are actually 170 millimeter cranks, nothing special about these. The pedals are actually kind of neat. They are a plastic pedal with this little latch that will fold, kind of neat. That does save you just an inch, but that little inch or so comes in handy when you're pulling it inside of a tight spot. Anyways, in this clean drive, it actually has a 32 tooth chain ring up in the front here. So there is a traditional chain ring. It's fairly small, and that comes back into here into the Shimano Nexus with a 3-speed that's actually built into there. So you have a little bit of spot here to accommodate for the wiring and stuff like that that comes into here. So it's all packed in here pretty well. Again, here's that protective cover. If you can see it in the sun, here's that protective cover that goes over the disc. Same style of brakes and everything, mirrored from front to back, along with the wheel and everything. So no surprises there. This is actually pretty neat because a large part of the cleanliness also lends to maintenance. So with a system that's pretty well contained like this, you're not going to get the kind of interference from bashing the bike around. So that's actually going to save you a little bit when you go to maintain the bicycle. Of course, that may, you know, I have no idea how to quantify this, but depending on the bike shop you go to, they might take a look at this and say this will require a little bit of extra work to open it up, and so there might be a possibility they charge you more. I don't really know. That all depends on who you find and what mood they're in that day, but it's certainly possible to take it apart. There's some fairly clear spots to take this this cover off and then access all of the mechanical features. So while we're at it, let's talk a little bit about these tires. These are actually a 20x2 for the size of the tire, fairly wide, kind of ballooned out, and definitely have a street tread on here. Not going to go off-road. And also a reflective sidewall that is built into both tires, which is pretty darn cool. So let's go ahead and talk about the electric system. I'd already mentioned the lights more or less. Nothing too crazy about those. I do want to reiterate that those are an added accessory. They're not stock with the bike, even though they fit perfect. I mean, they're not tacked on there. They're very much designed for it. But the motor is way up front. So this is actually a front hub drive, and the motor kind of extends out. It's not built into the hub of the wheel. It's actually a little bit external, if you want to call it that. So it's more or less a hub drive, but technically speaking, it's not part of the hub, because you can take the wheel off and the motor will stay on the bicycle right here. And this little guy is actually putting out 500 watts of energy, which is quite a bit for this little this little tank in here. 750 watt maximum. Of course, if you get this in another country, it might be 250 watts, but you know, that's something you'll have to look out for. But that's pretty neat that it's built into the front hub. For a commuting bicycle, for something that's going to go short little jaunts, it's not that big of a thing. Coming up in here, the control unit is actually kind of, I should talk about that in its own little space. To kind of get you going real quick, it has a main on-off button right here. So this actually turns the bike on and off. You press and hold that button, it'll beep a couple of times, and all it shows you is your battery level. I've ridden the bike a fair amount, so it just has 2 little red LEDs out of 4 or 5 that actually show up right there. So that's all it tells you. And then it goes back to the default setting, or the most recently used setting that you had sent to the bike from the app. So this bike actually has an app that you get from the Android Play Store or from the Apple App Store, I think it's called. You can tell I use Android. But anyways, you get an app on your phone and you can actually connect to the bike via Bluetooth, and then you can customize the settings however which way you want. So if you wanted to use it for super aggressive mode, you can actually change 2 basic parameters which have a great impact on the bike. The first parameter is how much energy the rider needs to put into it, and the second parameter is how much or how easily the top speed is engaged. So with those 2 basic things, it uses the torque sensor, a speed sensor, and a cadence sensor to get all of that stuff in tune. And you can actually customize it through the app to a profile that you want to set. And you can actually set multiple different profiles. It has a couple of presets if you want to do that way. But if you're like me, you're going to crank that guy all the way up to see what it's capable of. That's exactly what I did. I set the torque sensor for the most sensitive, meaning I have to put in the least amount of work, and the top speed is going to engage very quickly. So that's what I actually have it set for. When I get to another spot that has a little more shade, I'll try to show you guys the app. But I don't know if it's going to show up on camera. We'll give it a shot. We'll see what it does. But the app is actually pretty neat because aside from being able to set the bike to your specific profile that you want to customize, you can also use the app as a display, and I'll show you that. You pull up the app and then you put it onto the handlebars with a couple of like figure-8 rubber bands, and then it can be there if you want to see all the other measurements that really come in handy, things like your current speed, max speed, your trip set, ride time, things like that. All of that goes through the app. If you want to see real-time ride statistics, it doesn't come from the bicycle itself. It has to go through the app from Gocycle. All right, so I talked a little bit about the display. These are actually the rubber bands provided. They're like a figure-8 rubber band in which the phone rests. And I'll get to that in a little bit if we can actually get it showing up on camera. But getting into the battery is actually a 21.9 volt. It's a 21.9 volt, 13 amp hour battery that fits into this compartment in here. So let me show you how to get access to it. So we'll kind of fold the bike a little bit in order to get in there. So you unfold the bike. Well, I should probably turn it off. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, it's off. Excellent. So after you have the bike folded, in this case I have it folded just a tiny bit, it's actually back in here. And to get access to it, you got to get this pin out of the way. So we'll pull up on that pin, get it out of the way, and we'll keep it somewhere safe. And then you move the arm, and then shabams, you have access to the battery. Now the battery, you have to actually pull out this little ring, turn it upside down, and then you may pull. It's nice and snug. We'll get some leverage. Pull the battery out, and it slides out of position. So this is the battery. It's actually a pretty cool case, how it kind of tapers into that little section there. But this is a lithium-ion battery, you know, and it's pretty cool. Fits inside of here. There's the red on and off button that you wind up pressing on the outside of the bicycle through that rubber gasket. And then on the other side, you actually see the charge port for the charger. So this bike, by the way, does come with a 2-amp charger, but if you want to, you can get another added accessory to make a fast charge, if so desired. So let's go ahead and put this guy back inside. Let's see, slide it right back in there. Oh, it's a lot easier with 2 hands. There we go. And it's back into position. We'll turn that, let's see, we'll turn this little ring. I think I got to press it just a tiny bit more. There we go. We'll turn that ring, cinch it down. We'll get the arm back into position, get that handy little pin, and let's see, kind of finagle this guy in there. Got to get past that little pin. There we go. And shabams. That's how you get the battery in and out. So let's go ahead and close that back up, and then we'll cinch it into position, because heaven forbid I forget that. Okay, so we talked about the motor, we talked about the display, we'll talk about the ride characteristics when we actually get on the bike and take it for a ride. While I'm at it, why don't I go ahead and set up the tripod that I carried in the Gocycle bag, and I'll show you the folding feature. Let's go ahead and fold it up. Let's see, we'll take this little knob, loosen up the Vigonomic seat post tube, turn it around, get this little cap out of the way, put it into position there. Pretty neat. Open up the handlebars, put the stem down, fold up the pedals for good measure, and we will undo the main latch, the handlebars a little bit. Okay, and then fold it in half, and there we go. Da-da-da. Okay guys, there's one more thing I forgot to mention about the bicycle, and that's actually the kickstand. So it actually has 2 mounting arms, or I guess kickstand arms, or legs. But there's actually 2 legs on this guy, and it actually folds into position here. Now the reason I'm on this side of the bike is because I find it a lot easier to engage the kickstand or disengage the kickstand when I'm on what is the driver's right side of the bicycle. Typically I'm on the driver's left side of the bicycle. I don't know if it's an English thing, like from England or something, but I don't know, that's the way it is. So let's go ahead and flick it forwards, and then shabams, it comes into this spot right here, and then pressing either one of these will engage both of them at the same time to go back into position. But right now it's retracted. I got the whole thing on, so let's go ahead and take it for a spin. I forgot to mention the standover height of this bike is fairly low right there, so it's quite accommodating of a bicycle. You don't have to get your leg way the heck over there. You can also go around the other side if you're more accustomed to that, fairly low as well. All you got to do is get over the tire, and you don't even have the seat stays in the way like a traditional bike does, part of the frame. Yeah, let's go ahead, take it for a spin. So there we go. Here's that pedal assist. Now I should mention that the motor does have some noise to it when you got it cranked up all the way that I do. Now Gocycle has very much made an effort to make the bike feel like a traditional bicycle, the way that it pedals and the way that it engages, and that's why they have this advanced pedal assist system. So it's, the throttle is definitely not highlighted, it's kind of tucked away right in there, and also they don't really want you using the throttle from a cold start. You actually have to get the bike going a couple miles an hour before you can engage the throttle. So that might be a legality thing. They might want to be creeping up and not getting any trouble because they want to offer that feature, definitely, to have a throttle, but it's not really something they're focusing on. They want the bike to feel nice as a bicycle and ride like a bicycle, and it definitely does. Let's see, let's go ahead and, wrong way, there we go, crank it all the way up. So it feels good. I like the torque sensor quite a bit. Once you get going, once you get up to speed, then it feels pretty good also, because you can get it going and kind of get into a cruise. Caps out at 20 miles an hour, which is fine, it's fairly normal. But yeah, I did want to talk about the steering. You know, the steering definitely has that little bit of you know, I hate to say one-sidedness because that makes it sound like it only turns one way, but it definitely has a different profile to it. When steering to the left, feels fairly normal. When steering to the right, it's almost like you got a small little something that's kind of in the way. You can get used to it, you know, you could ride it a little bit more and you probably would notice. I kind of mentioned this before, but that's kind of how it feels when you're steering. So you can do some fairly good maneuvers at low speeds or probably high speeds just fine. It feels like, aside from that one little aspect, it feels pretty normal. It feels like a normal bicycle despite the way that it looks. You know, it definitely looks a little bit spacey when you see the design of it, but it's pretty good. And I gotta say, I was a little skeptical of that mounting position for the front basket. I was about to call it a rack. For that front basket, I was like, this isn't gonna hold. Those little nubs aren't gonna do it. I loaded it up with some stuff and it seems to be doing just fine. So yeah, so far so good. Got nothing else to complain about. One thing I would mention is that this bike definitely folds up really quick. So it's definitely attuned for riding the bike into, like, you know, an office building or into your house or something like that. But I can't help but get the feeling that the other Gocycles, like the Gocycle S, I don't know about the GXI, that model I'm not as familiar with, but I feel like the bike has such awesome like design qualities for that clean drive and how it can kind of like retract and slide in and how the wheels come off so easy. I really like those features. I think those are great. So if you want something that's quick and easy folder, I definitely get that that's what you're going for. But honestly, if it were me, I think I would prefer the other Gocycles just because I feel like you're really utilizing the full aspect of this very unique design. And I like this unique design quite a bit. You know, I've seen a lot of electric bikes in my days, and whenever you see something that's really kind of a ground up design like this one, really gets me excited. So I kind of like those added features that you see on the Gocycle 3, the Gocycle S, I think it is. So yeah, if it were me, I like properties about the GX, but I think I'd prefer the other ones. But that's me, that's my opinion. I don't really use a folding bike for traveling to an office. This is my office, so yeah, for me, I wouldn't really utilize what the GX in particular is made for. Maybe you would. Whoa, we're gonna go off-road. Hey, not so bad. Let me downshift a little bit. You know, I was a little skittish to take this thing off-road, but even in the loose bark dust, it still does it. You know, I kind of take that back. I think these wide tires are helping out a little bit. I initially thought, yeah, you wouldn't want to take this thing off-road. It's really kind of a city bike, and you know, it's definitely tuned for that. But hey, this is actually making it, so hey, why the heck not? Let's go ahead and get off of the bark dust. There we go. Let's go ahead and check out the app and we will wrap this up. Okay guys, and something a little bit new, I'll show you the app and kind of talk about that a little bit. So this is the default display, I suppose, for the Gocycle. Just those little lights that appear right here. The bike is actually turned off, but so you start up your telephone and then get the app going. So we'll go ahead and start that. And it looks like the app is just already turning itself on and it's offering to connect to the bike. So I suppose that connection is available whether the bike is turned on or off. So we'll go ahead and move out of the way. I don't know if these are going to light up or not. I've actually never tried this with the bike turned off. Okay, it said failed, try it again. So let's go ahead and turn the bike on this time. All right, so the bike is turned on and the connecting thing. Okay, there we go. Sweet. So this is like the main mode for the app. You can actually go in here into select mode, and there's a couple of different options here. So one of them is kind of a preset that they have for city power. Also some other ones that you can customize. I made one called Mega, which is the smallest amount of necessary torque from the rider. And then the top part of the graph is when you reach top speed or top output from the motor itself. So for example, if you have it cranked all the way this way, all the way that way, what you're telling it is that you want the minimum amount of power from your feet and you want the high top speed to come in at the last second. So in this case, if you crank this over, this is actually, let me grab it. What am I doing? There we go. Okay, so grab that little graph, pull them over, and in this mode, this is what I had to set for, you get maximum assist out of it possible, or you do the least amount of work and the top speed picks up pretty darn quick. But anyways, that's kind of like one of the first things that you'll probably want to do if you get in here. So let's go ahead and go back a little bit. Inside of here, it shows you a few things. It estimates your calories burned. It has your average speed, your max speed, equivalent miles per gallon that you're getting out of the bike. Of course, I'm not actually using the bike at this moment because we're here in the studio trying to film this. So we'll go ahead and turn it around. There we go. And then it turns into more of an automotive motif with a more traditional speedometer and your power level that you have here. You can cycle through the modes by pressing this little mode button, and that will just cycle through the presets that you have already made. So this one is a city one that comes by default, an eco mode by default, on-demand mode, which means it won't assist you at all, only the throttle, and I can imagine that's just a United States thing, custom, and right now I have it set on mega. So I actually am going to put it inside of these little rubber bands. It's like a figure 8 rubber band or something like that to attach your phone to the handlebars if you wish to have all of this information at the ready. Oop, I'm kind of smashing the buttons a little bit in order to get that on. So there we go. The rubber bands are pretty darn strong, I will say. It's not my preference to have a telephone up on the front for a permanent display. I like the display options overall. I kind of like the minimalist thing, so I probably would just set it one time and then never use my phone again. But if you're the type of person that wants to kind of see your active speed and you want to kind of count your miles or your calories or something like that, this is capable, but I wouldn't call it, it's certainly not integrated into the rest of the bike. It's almost like an add-on that you do with your phone. Your phone has an immense amount of power. I'm sure you can save some of this information if you wanted to. At the very least, you could do a screenshot. But, you know, that's the way that it works on the Gocycle. So definitely more of a new age thing to kind of have the app connectivity for it. But I like it overall. I think it's a good option. Okay guys, here we are on the Gocycle GX. You got a fairly wide view here where you can see the back of the clean drive, you can see the cranks and the bottom bracket, well, covered bottom bracket. You can also kind of see the front motor up there, so there's a pretty good vantage point. I got it cranked up all the way on the max pedal assist, so let's go ahead and take it for a spin. Okay, so there you go. There is the Gocycle GX cranked up all the way. Took a little bit of throttle, but overall the engagement is pretty quick thanks to that torque sensor cranked up all the way. So, cool stuff. Hey guys, so some time has actually passed using the Gocycle GX, not only for the sake of the review, but also using it personally around town, going into the downtown area, using it for some errands, things like that. And there's actually one important feature that I forgot to mention about the GX that's pretty neat. And that is that when after you fold up the bike, you can actually push it around with the seat post up in its folded state pretty easily. Since it's a lightweight bike and since it has some of those design features, it's actually a little bit easier than your traditional folding bike to push around in that folded state. So it's really easy to get in and out of an elevator, or in that case, I actually had some footage of me pushing it around in a parking garage downtown. That's where I was able to kind of show it and showcase it just a little bit. But it's actually one pretty cool thing that I forgot to mention while riding it around here in a less crowded, dense urban environment. But anyways, that was the other day. So thank you for watching the review of the Gocycle GX. If you want to check out the full written review with the pros and cons as well as all the measurements and specifications for this bike, go to ElectricBikeReview.com. While you're there, you can also check out the other Gocycle bikes that we have been able to review in the past, as well as compare all the specs and everything else with the rest of the industry. So thanks again for watching, guys. Ride safe.